So, the main focus on this lesson is the French Revolution, the French Revolution was initially had an absolute monarchy. You all know what is the meaning of absolute monarchy. Absolute monarchy is a term which is used to explain the authorities of a power of a particular person who is running the government and whose words are final. There is no more authority above him to go and appeal there. So this kind of authoritative person who is heading the government is known as absolute monarch. That too, when he is from a royal family and he is king, these words are appropriate. So in France we had the absolute monarchic system in existence till the year 1789. Once the revolt broke out in 1789, the people have marched out of their houses, walked onto the streets, blasted the Bastille Palace, made the king to run away from there, and they decided we did not go for absolute monarchic system further. We would go for our own governance of body of active citizens. So they decided to have body of active citizens. The body of active citizens means here that the people who are actually facing problems will be the part and parcel of the system of governance. They do not want somebody from a royal family will be dictating them what to do and what not to do. But it would be better for them that if the same people who are really facing problems, who are in the scenario, would be there present. So they decided to have the body of active citizens who will plan and further shape the future of the nation. So their duty is to shape the future of the nation. So when you talk about the shaping the future of the nation, what do they do? What do they want to do actually? They want to have a uniformity of laws. There should not be any discrimination to anybody. There is a new concept emerging outside like equality. There should be equality for everybody. This land belongs to everybody. Everybody belongs to the same country. There is no discrimination of based on the richness and the poorness. So they brought the word called La Patrie, meaning fatherland. La Patrie meaning fatherland. So the La Patrie meaning fatherland means that this land belongs to everybody, especially those who belong to that particular nation. And they also brought the concept of Le Citoyen, means citizenship. Citizens, you are the people or the citizens of this nation. Your fatherland is this. They also brought a new tricolor flag. Tricolor flag, which is clear that this flag is a symbolization of a new nation to be emerging outside. They also renamed the elected representatives as the government for themselves. So they renamed the existing system. They changed the names. They brought new patterns. They brought new hymns, new songs, and the martyrs who have sacrificed their lives in the struggle of the freedom to get this structure. So they commemorated, the martyrs were commemorated, the new hymns were sung, the language which are spoken regionally, which are having the regional dialectics, were being discarded. French, which is spoken in Paris, the capital of France, has been made the official language of the French. So these all aspects made it very clear for the people that we need to understand this very clearly. The change of a pattern of the existing system from the absolute monarchy to the elected representatives, the new government coming, stepping in, rather than replacing the existing things, and the citizens were made very active. People started to participate very actively in the system. They also decided that this awakening should happen for every nation in the Europe. So they literally want every nation, the Europe, to have different nations, different nationalities to be coming up in Europe. The concept of nationalism should emerge in Europe. This ideologies made it very clear. That is the reason why it is rightly known as, when France sneezes, Europe gets cold. So the revolution first started in France. It started to spread to all the countries in Europe. It spread to Germany, it spread to Italy, it spread to Hungary, it spread to Austria. So it started to spread on to all the countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia. All these countries started to turn up towards the existing system. They started to think on the lines of French Revolution. The concept of equality, the concept of citizenship, the ideology of nationalism has been spreading up in all the countries of Europe. So this is not a one-day process. And French Revolution people always, they thought that we need to advocate this ideology to all people. Then only this ideology can be spread to various other people, and they all can come under the categorization of the different nations rather than coming under the different kingdoms. So this was the initial understanding of French Revolution. Now we are going to start the historical struggle or the struggles around the world. Let us first start with Europe. When we talk about Europe, we need to have a specific identity, a country called France. There is a saying also, if France sneezes, Europe gets cold. The concept is, if any issue which starts at France initially, its effect is being felt all around the Europe. So if France will sneeze, the Europe will get cold. It's like a nose for the entire Europe, where once it gets affected, everything gets affected. So now let us try to understand what is the French Revolution, and how did the concept of nationalism emerged out in Europe. So the concept is rise of nationalism in Europe. This is the first unit of history which we are going to start now. The rise of nationalism in Europe. What is the word of the meaning of the word nation? First of all, we are trying to understand what is nationalism in Europe. How did the nationalism evolved in Europe? So let us try to understand what is the meaning of the word nation. Nation is a group of people living together who share a common land, who live together, who follow the same language, same culture, same identity. These people are together known as nation. So, a group of people who share same culture, language, place, etc., can be called as a nation. The place may be called as a nation. Then what is nationalism? The feeling of attachedness towards a particular nation or feeling pursuit towards that nation is called nationalism. So it's a feeling who have a common language, common religion, common boundaries, common things are called as, will provoke them to have the feeling of nationalism. This can be understood like this: a state of belongingness towards a nation or an ethnic group. So, the belongingness, the feeling, as I told you earlier, the feeling or the belongingness towards a particular nation or being associated with something makes them to get the rise of nationalism. If you are not connected with your nation, you do not have the feeling of nationalism or patriotism. So, this is the understanding of the main point what we are going to discuss in Europe. So, in Europe, Europe itself is a continent. In Europe, we have many countries together. So, in Europe, out of many countries, how can you understand the facts of Europe, or like how different nations have influenced their struggles towards the other nations to come towards the struggles? So, that's something which started in France, which spread entirely towards the Europe. First, our attention will be towards France, then we shall move on how it got spread down. So, when we talk about the French issue, French is the official language spoken by the people of France. So, before discussing about the French issue, we shall look at the pictures which are given in the page 1. The page 1 pictures will reveal for us the facts. What happened is Frederick Sérieux, Frederick Sérieux has made 4 paintings in which he expressed the feeling of nation states, republic and social rights, belonging to one group or one nation, Statue of Liberty, so in his paintings he tried to portray the scenes which he dreamed of to be have in Europe. He initially had a dream where he portrayed that all the people of Europe are merging towards the Statue of Liberty, where the Statue of Liberty is standing with a torch on the light showing the way to the people. On the other hand, it's hanging the rights of the individuals. So he wants the people to understand that they have future when they have the rights. He wants them to understand clearly that there is certain limitation of the existing system. He had a huge dream of social and republican governments. He had the ideology of socialism. There should not be any kind of discrimination. There should not be any restricted power houses, or there should not be a family which holds the entire power thoroughly. These all things have to be changed. That is the meaning of the words what he have used, like social, republic, nation states, where he want a new group of nations to turn up, where he don't want the kingdoms to be in existence. He want the leaders to be removed off. He want the new systems to be coming in. He want the systematic governance to be happening. So all these words which he has used belonging to one nation, the nationalism, the rights which are held by the Statue of Liberty according to him. He made the Statue of Liberty to be a female figure, and his dream was to have a nation state where the people are the supreme people, where people have the right to govern themselves. These all are the hidden things, and on his own paintings he also had a vision of angels coming and blessing the people who are having these kind of ideas and the ideologies. These are some of the pictures which depict for us, which were drawn in 1848 by Mr. Frederick Sarajevo in his series of 4 paintings. Now, let us understand what actually happened in the French Revolution. Then we shall move on to the developments of the concepts of nationalism, then the turning of the phases of French Revolution, then we shall move on to the other aspects. So now, there are struggles of the people, the revolts, these all we have discussed. Now let us try to find out how did the unification of Italy and Germany happen. So, the making of Germany and Italy. When we talk about the making of Germany in particular, we may get a doubt like who was the person who initiated and who stood forward to fight and unite against the common enmities, against the unification of Germany, and brought the impossible task to the possible extent. So, he is none other than a key minister in the cabinet of that particular kingdom. He is Otto von Bismarck. He was the architect of the army first. So, can the army be the architect of the unification? This was a question. Can the army be the architect of the unification of a nation? How is it possible? We need leaders to fight. We need people to get together. But how can the army strength make a nation to become together? This was a question which was raised when initially Otto von Bismarck started the process of uniting Germany. So the process of uniting of Germany was not an easy task. It was a very difficult task. The troubles or the problems or the hurdles for the unification of Germany are, we have some parts of Germany under the control of Austria. Then we need to unite north and south parts of Prussia. And again, we have parts occupied by Denmark, and finally the southern states of Prussia under the control of France. So we have the common enmities, hurdles like Austria, then we have France and Denmark. So these three countries have occupied some parts of Prussia. Prussia is again further divided into northern and southern states. So these states are to be united, and these states which are occupied by Austria, France and Denmark has to be relieved from the influence of Austria, France and Denmark. Then only the possible of unification of Germany can be done. The King William I, who was fond of Otto von Bismarck, recruited him and made him as a chief minister in his kingdom. So now William I was a king. Otto von Bismarck is the chief minister of the Germany kingdom, or ununited German kingdom, or the kingdom of Prussia. The task of Bismarck to unite all these northern and the southern states with the states which are struck in the hands of Austria, France and Denmark has to be made very clear. So, first of all, Bismarck believed in the policy of blood and iron. Bismarck believed in the policy of blood and iron. Blood means the young blood, the more number of people. Blood does not mean here any kind of bloodshed. He wants blood means more number of people, and iron symbolizes the strength. When more number of people are there, the strength will be very strong. So his intention was to have larger army and a strong army. That was his main mindset, and his policy was blood and iron. So the point of Otto von Bismarck's policy was blood and iron. So he wanted to increase the army of Prussia from 40,000 to 60,000 battalions, the soldiers. When he passed this issue in the assembly, in the parliament, the people of the kingdom got astonished and expressed their concerns that if the 40 to 60,000 soldiers were expanded or increased, the cost of bearing them would directly fall on effect with the people or on the people. So when the effect falls on the people, it would make their lives troublesome. So between the people and the king, the link is Otto von Bismarck. He made the king to agree not to conduct any meetings further till the issue has been cooled down, and he stopped the meetings of the parliament, and he became the tension between the people and the king, and he, with his influence over the king, passed the laws to increase the strength of the army. First, he increased the strength of the army. He made it very strong and capable to fight wars. Once after he made the army to be compatible to fight wars, he made the first war with Denmark in 1864. He made the first war with Denmark in 1864 by taking the help of Austria. While he took the help of Austria, defeated Denmark and occupied the places. Later on, so when he waged the war with Denmark and he defeated Denmark with the support of Austria, he got back Schleswig and Holstein regions. So in the first war, he was able to capture the regions by defeating Denmark, the Schleswig and Holstein. This was the first war which gave strength for the Prussian army that they can defeat any army and they can occupy the kingdoms. This also made people to think some kind of positive vibrations towards Bismarck. Anyway, Bismarck was nowhere concerned with the issues of the people. His target or his main agenda is to unite Germany at any cost. So finally, with the help of Austria, he defeated Denmark in the first war and was able to capture Schleswig and Holstein. Later, what happened? So, when Austria helped to fight against Denmark in 1864, the kingdoms of Schleswig and Holstein, the regions went in the control of Austria. So now Bismarck want Austria to move away from the lands of Prussia. So Austria holds Schleswig, Holstein and Hanover, Hesse-Kassel, Darmstadt, all these regions and some part of the Frankfurt region. So he want Austria completely away from Prussia. So in order to make Austria alone, Bismarck extended his friendly hand with Napoleon. He made friendship with Napoleon. He made it a statement or an agreement like we would be friends, and he made Austria away from the relation of France. So now Bismarck warned Austria to leave the kingdoms of Prussia, which escalated the war in 1866. So in 1866, the war broke out between Prussia and Austria, where France remained neutral. So during that time, Austria was completely defeated with a very huge army and could not get any support in time, and finally Austria was defeated and the entire regions of Schleswig-Holstein, Hanover, Hesse-Kassel and Darmstadt were completely taken over control by the Germans or the Prussians. Now the task is how to take control of the southern states of Prussia. The problem is southern states are not occupied by anybody. The southern states are independent states. The southern states are Bavaria, Baden, Württemberg. Bavaria, Baden and Württemberg. This Bavaria, Baden and Württemberg were actually under the influence of Napoleon. Though they are independent, they are afraid of the Napoleon's invasion towards them. So if they were been ascended or been associated with the Prussia, they are afraid that Napoleon might attack our kingdoms. So now Bismarck want a war with Napoleon. Till yesterday, Napoleon want to maintain friendly relations in order to eliminate Austria and make it a singular in the game. Now he want a war with France in order to complete the unification of Germany. So in 1863, Isabella, who was ruling Spain, she was removed, and King Leopold, who was very close relative of William I, the King of Prussia, was invited to take over that one. But as Isabella was a relative or far off relative of Napoleon, Leopold rejected to take over the control. So now, though he rejected that time, Napoleon want a strong promise from the King of Prussia saying that we would not intervene or any of our family members would not step over to take the throne of Spain. He want it as a promise. This was a right moment for which Bismarck was waiting. Actually, the King of Prussia was out of the town, the capital town. Then the message reached to Bismarck because obviously he is a chief minister. He was the first person to be intimated about the concerns which was raised from the other emperor. So when the concern was raised by the other emperor, Bismarck, instead of sending the message to the king, he replied it back on the name of the king in such a way that it raised the anger between the French people and the German people or the Prussian people. So finally, this resulted in another war in the year 1870. The war with France. So in 1870, a huge war broke out, and finally Bismarck was able to defeat the French huge Napoleon army, and Napoleon surrendered after a 6 months continuous war. So with this, the southern states were freed from the influence of Napoleon, and the unification of Germany was declared in 1871. And William I has been declared as the Emperor of United Germany. So in this way, the process of unification of Germany happened. The key role played by Bismarck. Let us have a quick recap of all the events and we shall conclude the unification of Germany. The making of Germany and Italy both went parallelly in the same guidelines. Though the struggle was different, here we have one person taking the initiative and doing it, where there we have different people stepping in and contributing to a very large extent. Now, when Bismarck initially wanted to increase the strength of the army, people opposed the views of Bismarck because they thought it would be a burden for the common man. because obviously it would raise the taxes which they have to pay. But as he believed in the policy of blood and iron, he made the issue very clear, used the parliament, strengthened the army, waged wars tactically, using the situations, making friendly relations, breaking the relations, occupied the regions. First, he eliminated Denmark from the map of Prussia by making friendship with Austria and took over the controls from Denmark to Austria. Then next, he eliminated Austria from the scene by taking the help of France to maintain France to be neutral. Later, he uses the issue in Spain, then he escalated the war in 1870 and he eliminated France from the influence of Prussia. And finally, in 1871, after he was victorious in the three wars, he was able to successfully unite the Germany and declare King William I as the Emperor of United Germany. This is the way Bismarck played a tactful and complete politics or a statesman politics to make the unification of Germany. So in this way it would be right to say that army was the architect of the nation, or the key man behind the unification of Germany was none other than Bismarck. He played really a very vital role in the unification of Germany. So as we have an initial idea of the French Revolution brought the government of National Assembly coming into existence. So after the National Assembly has come into existence, the citizens were recognized to be equal. There is no any kind of discrimination based on them. They were made active citizens. So after this has been done, initially for a period of 1 year, in 1790s, the Jacobins clubs were being established all around the France, and secretly a revolution came which took over the ruling in 1791 by the Jacobin group's leader Robespierre. So after Robespierre has taken away the rule, he tried his level best to bring the discriminations to completely an end. He regulated the market prices, he reduced the prices, and he maintained strictly order that any kind of wheat other than the good quality should not be sold in the market, and that too not in a very high extent. It should be at the reach of a common man. So these all steps made him very clear, and most of the people started to like his administration in the initial days. But later he started to eliminate the people, those who are not supporting to his ideas and the ideologies. So this, he started to have a machine called guillotine, in which we have a machine structure which is designed to behead the person. So later in 1793, he himself was being beheaded because of the extremism which he has expressed in making his rules and regulations and making the people to follow all these things, initiated to a larger scale of dissatisfaction among the people. So once his turn has been off, we are in a situation where the term has come to a directory rule. In the directory rule, where instead of one person having the entire control, the four different groups, the Napoleons, the Bonaparte groups, and the people, those who are revolutionary groups, those who are constitutional groups, these all people came to force and they formed the government, where instead of in one person hand, we have a directory government rule. So in this directory government rule, where initially we have representatives from all the parties taking over and running it into existence. But as the time passed on, the mission of French Revolution, when initially people decided that we will wage wars, we will make it to grow an extent and bring the nations in Europe rather than kingdoms in Europe. So in 1790, when Napoleon was made the brigadier general of the army, and he waged wars against Italy, Switzerland, Belgium, Holland, all these countries, they were very much happy and they welcomed the armies with a greater excitement. They were considered as the harbingers of freedom, or harbingers of the human relationship, harbingers of the nationalism. the people, those who initiate the process, those who start the process, those who are very much associated with this one. So this made the people to welcome the armies of French initially. The Napoleon in 1799 has taken over the dictatorship rule, I mean like the constitutional monarchy. He turned to be a complete monarch. So the era of Napoleon. So after Robespierre we have the directory rule. So after the situations turned, we have Napoleon. Napoleon, absolutely, after he became the emperor, he has shed aside the democratic structure of France. This is a fact. We need to agree here. But though he had brought the rule of democracy into end, but he initiated the process of having a proper structure, and he brought certain rules and regulations known as Civil Code in the year 1804. This is also famous as Napoleonic Code. So according to the rules, code is a conduct of rules. According to these rules, he or she is a free citizen. There is no kind of any discrimination based on any citizens. There is no financial disparity between anybody, and all the people have to follow certain rules and regulations. This made it very clear that concept of equality. So not only this, he had simplified the administrative structure. He had freed the peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. He simplified the administration. Reduced the taxes. New tax system. So, when the peasants were freed from their regular bondageness of working under some royal family or the relatives of the royal group or the manor lords, and they were forced like a beggar to work without much of the payments paid, this was been completely waived out. And the next major thing what he has done, he has waived out all the dues of all the people those are working under them. There is no person to check you or tell you like you are having a due with a particular monarch. So these all changes have initiated to a greater success to the Napoleon initially. And he also brought a systematized administrative structure. He simplified everything. Initially, we used to have 39 states, and the tax collection system unit is called as Zollverein, where you need to pay at 11 places different taxes, minimum 5% of the customs duty if you want to cross all these regions and go to the other side. But Napoleon changed all these things. Napoleon changed the entire taxation pattern. He reduced the taxes from 60% to 10 to 15%. He brought a new initiative. The businessmen, the small and the large business people were able to happily experience the new patterns of the system, and he made everybody equal. The opportunities are provided equally. There is no certain kind of discriminations based on any grounds. So this initial process and abolition of the serfdom, abolition of any kind of discriminations, and abolition of any kind of dues, and he also abolished the feudal system. So he abolished the feudal system, which is a very large and a major step what he has taken. These all steps made him really welcome in all the other countries like Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, all these countries. But because of his steps of stepping in and changing the administration, which was already welcomed by all the people, but the taxation system which made the French people to do more and more wars in order to get more and more land under their control, so that the taxation would be added for them and they would have certain amount of money under the court, the royal court. So in order to maintain the economic balance, we need to wage wars, and these wars are at the cost of others' interest. So when initially Napoleon was considered as a crusader for them, who will provide every opportunity for them to develop. So in Brussels, in Milan, various other places, his army was welcomed with great enthusiasm, with great expectations. People were very happy with the system, the patterns are going on. The administrative reforms are really very good, very successful. But it is not going in hand with the political freedoms. The administrative things are going very well designed, but the political freedoms are being curbed for them. What are the political freedoms? What that being stopped for them initially were the censorship has been imposed on them. There is no right to talk against any of the rulers or the dictators. Obviously, censorship has been imposed. Later on, we can understand this like taxation increased and forced conscription into French army. So the censorship anyway, it was been a block on the freedom of the people, but when it comes to taxation increased. So initially you mentioned like the taxation of different 60%, 11 taxes have been reduced and brought it to one tax. Yes, this taxation has been brought in France, where initially we used to have 11 different types of taxes that has to be paid from when we pass from capital to the other regions. They were all cancelled. Single taxation was brought, single currency has been issued. But as when it comes to the other states, when they were occupying the other states, there they used to collect more taxes. There are more censorship on the activities of the people. Everything is being checked properly. And third point is the very important point which changed the mindset of the people. Forcefully they used to conscriptate them or make them to join in the French army. So why they need to join the other country people into the French army? Why? Because here he want a large army in order to redraw the map of France, redraw the control of the French region. Napoleon want to have control on the other regions of Europe. So this idea of Napoleon itself brought a trouble for the people who are in Belgium, who are in the other countries of Brussels, Italy, Milan, all the other regions, where initially they felt that he would come here and bring nationalism spirit to us and give freedom for us. But he is coming here, occupying our land, squeezing our wealth and forcing us to join into the French army to fight the other countries. This has been subsiding the administrative achievements what Napoleon has achieved and which people have appreciated initially, but these administrative changes were not going in surpass with the political freedom, where they are going in opposite directions, which raised the anger of the people, and this brought dissatisfaction towards the French armies in the people of Austria, Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, all the other countries. So how did the nationalism or making of nationalism emerge in Europe, leaving apart the French Revolution concept? Now we will try to understand how was the actual working of French Revolution's impact on the other nations fell on. So after the French Revolution has impacted, we have seen how the people are being changing their attitude towards the Napoleon's rule. We already have discussed how the systems are going on in respect to Napoleon's code and conduct. We already know that autocratic regimes or autocratic monarchies are present. How is the concept of nationalism spreading in Europe? What are the factors that led to the spread of nationalism in Europe? Let us think in the practical terms, or let us find out what actually is happening in Europe. Europe can be broadly categorized into two parts: Eastern Europe, Western Europe. So after categorizing Eastern Europe and Western Europe, you can see that there are autocratic monarchies present here. Autocratic monarchies are the monarchies who have come with the arbitrary rule of the family hierarchy, and monarchy itself gives a clear picture for us that they are coming from the hierarchy line. They are not at all in the favor or interest of the people. And next one, they are not having any collective identity. The collective identity means here that they do not follow any common language, common culture, common pattern of religion or anything else. But still, they are bound. Only the reason is because they are having common allegiance to an emperor. They are controlled by a large and mighty powerful emperor. So under his control only they are working. Other than that, there is no common element which is binding them together. And it's not only the case with Eastern and the Western of Europe. We have many countries also in specific. If you take the Austria and Hungary, which are under the control of the Habsburg family. Austria has a different set of culture and pattern. Hungary had a different set of culture and pattern. But both are bound only because they are controlled by the Habsburg family. And then if you take Italy, Germany, Venetia, Lombardy, Lombardy, Venetia, Parma, Modena, Tuscany, all these places, Galicia, Germany, Bohemians, Slavs, Romans, there is no political unity at all in any aspect. They are neither speaking any common language, neither following any religion, neither following any patterns which are similar in their lifestyle. So then what is the common binding between all these people? Because they have a common boss. The common boss is a common emperor. The common emperor controls everybody, so the same taxation, same rules which are made by the emperor, not by the people for themselves. They are forced to follow all these rules and regulations which are made by the emperor. These all things made them to be bound together. So this bounding together made them to think against a common enemy. This factor of common enmity or common problems which they are facing made them to think on the same guidelines towards to fight out against the ruler. This was the base, the foundation for the growth of a seed of nationalism. The seed of nationalism has been incepted because of the extreme powers which are being enforced on them by the dictators or the monarchies. This monarchy is bound various different cultural people. When the different cultural people are bound together and asked to perform in a similar way, that forces the people to think and have their own identity. Their own things have to be under their own religion, their own practices have to be respected. These all things change the pattern or the mindset of the people's thinking. So then, after the mindset of the people has been taken, the other major class which is in the existence of the European society, what is the other major section of the people coming under? Once if they are bound by some authority, the other major sections of the people, let us find out the different classes of people who live in Europe. What are the different categories of people that who stay in Europe? We have the major role played by the aristocracy, next the middle class. Let us first find out of the aristocracy. Aristocracy people have a common way of life. As I told you just now, there is no common way of life in these people's togetherness. They all are not together because they follow a common pattern, common religion or common language. They do not follow any of these things in common. They are only bound by the authorities of a common man. That man is a monarch and emperor. But when it comes to here in the aristocracy, you have a common way of life. We have a common owned estates. They have their own estates. Everybody often owns an estate. Generally they have their own estates. Then the language which is spoken by them is a French language. It used to be used for official purposes. So they used to speak official language, French language for the diplomatic relationships, and they also have marriage bonds or marriage ties having between them each other. So within their own group, they used to get married their own daughters to the other people, where that they should maintain their own status of aristocracy people. And moving, peasantry was the other major class of the society which is found here. Then we have the growing of the middle class people in the bulk. So the aristocracy people are not very large in number but very influential in society. They are in a very minor section of the community of the society. They are falling under very less pattern of society. They are coming under very few in number in terms of numbers. But their influence has been very large. They own thousands of acres of land under their names of estates. So that is the reason why they hold a large group of peasants. They used to force the peasants to work for bonded labor, slavery. They used to have a clear serfdom. They favored the federalism concept. They have the feudal lord concept. They used to act as a manor lords. So these all things made the people to think against them, to talk against them, to raise their voices against them. So how did the people get that courage to talk against them? Because peasants are working under the same community. They used to face the atrocities, whatever they used to do. Now moving on to the other pattern. When it comes to the development of the middle classes, the role of the industrial revolution has never been neglected, because the process of development of a common man started only with the industrial revolution. With the rapid changes that came out in the industrial revolution, revealed the fact that a common man also can do work in the industries, irrespective of the agriculture field, irrespective of the climatic conditions, irrespective of the problems which of the lack of rains, lack of seeds and all these things. He can work for a specific period of time and he can earn a fixed amount of salary which would raise their standard of living in their lives. This industrial revolution, rapid growth, trade across the countries. Initially, people used to trade within their own countries. But as the time passed on, people started to trade to the other countries, to the abroad nations. With that, their same trade has been expanded to various countries. The income of their families has been increased to a very large extent when it compared to the previous times. So these all things made it very clear the development of a common man standard to a middle class level, where they have done a hard work, they are being paid for that. So this kind of industrial revolution, changes in the 19th century, which all made a new class to turn up. We have initially the nobles, the aristocrats, then a peasantry group. But in the middle we got the middle class people who got benefited by the industrial revolution, who earned their incomes by the industrial rapid changes, who used to have trade rings with the other nations. So these all things made other group to step in, to have their own identity. So they got the courage to ask against the atrocities which are made by the aristocracy or the monarchy. These developments also favored for the rise of nationalism. As the aristocrats had a common culture, common way of living, commonly owned estates and all these things. In the same way, in the guidelines of the aristocratic lifestyle, the middle class people also started to own certain wealthy properties, have a systematic pattern of life, worshipping a common god, having a common language of conversation, having a common currency, having a trade links with other people. This also made the middle class people to gain a prominence important in the society. So these all things also gave way to rise of the favoritism of nationalism. So as we have seen the unification of Italy, the rise of Napoleon, the Congress of Vienna, then the unification of Germany under the guidance and the leadership of Otto von Bismarck. Then we have seen the various people contributing for the unification of Italy. We also have seen a strange case which happened in Great Britain. Now, why is the visualization, or how can a nation be represented? That is the theme of the topic now, like visualizing the nation. How can a nation be visualized? A man can be visualized by his body structure, a woman with certain features. Then how can a nation be visualized? All people have to synchronize to that one. All people have to identify themselves with that particular thing. So how can people do this one? How can people get associated with these kind of things? These all things are very, very important and necessary. So what are the major steps that are necessary to have these kind of upliftment of the situation, or to have the focus towards a nation's particular symbol? How can we visualize a nation? So the artists of France, the artists of the Germans, in order to get it connected with the people, they started to make the statues or the inscriptions by describing people with a woman, the role of a nation with a woman, the liberator with a woman's ideology. So that's what, like, female allegory. The female allegory has become the symbol of the nation. How can a female allegory be the symbol of the nation? When we talk about the motherland, when we talk about the contribution to our own country, we use the word mother more symbolically. So in order to get more symbolically the access, they have designed to use the allegory. The allegory means something which is used to specify in a figure. So the female figures are being used to represent a particular nation in their descriptions, in their portraying of the art, architecture, the style of the diagrams, and all these things. Whenever they used to portray anything, they used to portray a woman with a long gown, with a red cap, with certain symbols, with a knife, with an oak leaves, with all these things, the specific features which are connected with the common man's life, like freedom, like to have specific ideologies, to have a specific description of what the nation has, having a pair of weighing glasses or like weighing machines. So all these things have made the symbol of a nation. That is, a female allegory has stepped in. That is the first major step to visualize a nation. Later on, when we talk about the words like liberty, equality and fraternity. Liberty, equality and fraternity are the three major themes which are being raised from the revolt of French Revolution. French Revolution is recognized all over the world with these three words. So when the allegory, the female allegories are being made, these three are being associated with the allegory of the female one. So as a symbol of liberty, the red cap has been kept. As a symbol of equality, the broken chains. And as a symbol of fraternity, the blindfolded woman weighing scales. All these are being a symbolic representation of what they actually want. So slowly people started to get associated with this kind of images towards their motherland. So when they started to identify themselves with these particular pictures, and in order to have this picture as a national symbol, as their cultural national remark, so these statues are being kept at all the public places, all the 4 road junction places, to make it to identify to the people. And when it comes to the Germans have used one of the popular names in the Christianity, that is the name of mother of the Christ known as Marianne. Marianne also used to have the same color of red cap, tricolor flag and the cockade. This cockade is the symbol of their freedoms. So when we move on to the name of Marianne to the name to a Germania. Germania also used to have oak leaves in her hand, which means like that is a symbol of the freedom, that is a symbol of grace. So these all things slowly made the people to get connected with the female allegory, and they started to visualize the things with the female structures or with the female images. So a nation, a motherland to a female image. A French, then the Statue of Liberty, a female statue. Then we move on to Germans, Marianne turning with oak leaves, red cap, tricolor flags, which later to be called as Germania. So the people started to get connected to it, and wherever the public places are being there, the statues of this Germania are being erected. When the Germans were broken down or when they lost the war, we have seen the portraying of the artist like Germania falling down. When the Germania has fallen down, it means symbolically that the Germany has fallen down completely. So these kind of all efforts were made by the artists of that particular time to get connected with the situation and also to make nation to be visualized with that particular allegory, the female allegory.